When Marcus Williams moved his family into their dream home in an exclusive neighborhood, he never expected to become the target of a sophisticated surveillance operation. A simple backyard barbecue triggers a chain of events that exposes decades of corruption reaching to the highest levels of local government. What the neighborhood watch never realized. The black family they chose to harass included a former military intelligence officer with the skills to turn their own surveillance against them. Now, one family's fight for justice will dismantle an entire system of discrimination that forced dozens of minority families from their homes. The hunters become the hunted in this riveting true-to-life story of justice, courage, and the power of fighting back against those who abuse their authority. Would you have the courage to stand up against an entire neighborhood of harassers? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary justice. It was the kind of perfect July afternoon that made Marcus Williams believe moving to Oakridge Heights had been the right decision for his family. The sun hung high in the cloudless sky as he meticulously arranged hamburger patties on the grill, the sizzle of meat meeting hot metal filling the air with a mouthwatering aroma. "Dad, is the food almost ready?" called Jasmine, his 14-year-old daughter, from the other side of their spacious backyard. She was setting up the volleyball net with her younger brother Tyler. "Another 10 minutes, sweetheart," Marcus replied, flipping a burger with practiced precision. At 45, Marcus had finally achieved what many called the American dream. After 20 years working his way up from package handler to regional operations director at a major shipping company, he'd saved enough to purchase this beautiful four-bedroom home in what the realtor had enthusiastically described as one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the state. The Williams family had moved in just 3 weeks ago, making them the first black family on Maple Lane. Marcus's wife Tanya emerged from the sliding glass doors carrying a large bowl of potato salad. Her natural hair was pulled back in a colorful head wrap, her smile radiant as she placed the bowl on the outdoor dining table. "The neighbors across the street are watching us again," she whispered to Marcus, maintaining her smile while nodding subtly toward the Hendersons' house. "Third time today I've caught them peeking through their blinds." Marcus shrugged. "Let them look, we're just having a family barbecue." "I know, but it feels intrusive," Marcus finished her sentence. "I know, babe. But we belong here just as much as they do." What the Williams family didn't know was that their arrival had sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Oakridge Heights. Richard Peterson, the neighborhood watch captain who lived 2 doors down, had called an emergency meeting just days after the Williams moved in. "Property values, folks," Peterson had told the gathered neighbors in his living room. "We need to monitor the situation closely, make sure they understand how things work around here." Across the street, Karen Henderson adjusted her binoculars from her second-floor window. Her husband Frank stood behind her, arms crossed. "What are they doing now?" Frank asked. "Just barbecuing," Karen replied, not lowering the binoculars. "But did you see how many cars they have? 3, and one of them looks expensive. How can they afford to live here?" "Something's not right," Frank muttered. Peterson said he's got a plan. Back in the Williams yard, the family was blissfully unaware of the surveillance. Tyler, now 12, had convinced his dad to toss the football while the burgers finished cooking. Jasmine was helping her mother arrange the table, their laughter carrying across the lawn. The doorbell rang, its chime audible even from the backyard. "I'll get it," Tanya called out, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel as she headed inside. When she opened the front door, she found Richard Peterson standing there with a clipboard, flanked by 2 other men she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Williams, I'm Richard Peterson, neighborhood watch captain," he said without smiling. "We've had reports of unauthorized activity at this address." "Unauthorized activity?" Tanya repeated, confused. "We're having a family barbecue." "Yes, well, there are concerns about noise levels, smoke violations, and potential fire hazards," Peterson said, consulting his clipboard. "May I come in to discuss this further?" Tanya felt a chill despite the summer heat. "My husband and I are entertaining our children in our backyard. There are no violations happening here." "Ma'am, we have photographic evidence suggesting otherwise," one of the other men said, holding up his phone to show what appeared to be zoomed-in photos of the Williams' backyard, clearly taken from a neighboring property. What none of them realized was that the Williams family barbecue was about to become the flashpoint for a neighborhood conflict that would expose far more than just racial tensions in Oakridge Heights. Marcus felt something was wrong the moment Tanya called him inside. Her voice carried that distinct tension he'd learned to recognize over their 17 years of marriage. Placing the spatula down and adjusting the grill temperature, he made his way through the sliding glass door. In the foyer stood 3 men with Richard Peterson front and center, clipboard in hand. Marcus recognized him as the neighbor who had barely acknowledged their waves since moving in. "What seems to be the problem?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm as he stood beside Tanya. Peterson straightened his posture. Mr. Williams, we've received multiple complaints about unauthorized activities on your property. Unauthorized? Marcus raised an eyebrow. We're having a family barbecue. On our own property. The second man, who later introduced himself as Frank Henderson, stepped forward and held up his phone. We have documentation of potential code violations. Marcus took the phone and felt his stomach tight. The screen displayed a high-resolution photo of his backyard, clearly taken from an elevated position with a zoom lens. In the image, Marcus could see himself at the grill from just minutes earlier. The timestamp in the corner showed 2:43 p.m. today. Are you photographing my family without our consent? Marcus asked, his voice level despite his rising anger. Neighborhood Watch, Peterson replied smugly. We have an obligation to document suspicious activities. Suspicious? Tanya interjected. How is a family barbecue suspicious? The third man, whom Marcus didn't recognize, cleared his throat. There's also the matter of your renovations. We understand you've made modifications to the property without HOA approval. There is no HOA in this neighborhood, Marcus stated flatly. We checked before purchasing and we haven't made any renovations. Peterson's eyes narrowed slightly. Perhaps not officially, but we have certain standards that we maintain. As they spoke, Jasmine appeared in the hallway behind her parents. Dad, the burgers are starting to smoke. Go handle them, sweetie, Marcus said without turning around, maintaining eye contact with Peterson. I'll be there in a minute. Once Jasmine was out of earshot, Marcus lowered his voice. Let me be very clear, you have no authority here. You're trespassing and harassing my family. I suggest you leave now. We're not finished, Peterson began, but Marcus cut him off. Yes, you are, he opened the door wider. Leave now. After a tense moment, the three men backed away, but not before Peterson added, This neighborhood has a certain character we intend to preserve, Mr. Williams. Consider this a friendly warning. After closing the door, Marcus turned to find Tanya already on her phone, scrolling through photos. What are you doing? He asked, looking at our property listing photos, she replied, her voice tight. Marcus, look at this. She showed him the screen, a real estate photo of their backyard taken before they purchased the house. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable once you knew to look for it, was a small black object mounted under the eave of the Hendersons' second-story window. Is that, Marcus began. A camera, Tanya confirmed. Pointed directly at our yard, and look at this one. She swiped to another photo showing their front yard. In the background, partially obscured by decorative landscaping on Peterson's property, was another camera aimed at their driveway. They had these installed before we even moved in, Tanya whispered. This isn't random, this is targeted. Marcus took a deep breath. Let's not jump to conclusions. Let me finish the barbecue and we'll discuss this tonight after the kids are asleep. But as he returned to the grill, Marcus noticed something he hadn't before, a small reflective lens peeking from behind the fence separating their yard from Peterson's property. His jaw tightened as he realized the extent of their surveillance. That evening, after Tyler and Jasmine had gone to bed, Marcus and Tanya sat at their kitchen table with a laptop between them. I've found 3 cameras definitely pointed at our property, Marcus said, showing Tanya the marked-up property photos. One covering the front, one on the side, and one directly into our backyard. This has to be illegal, Tanya said, her voice a mixture of anger and fear. They're recording our children, Marcus nodded slowly. Tomorrow I'm going to make some calls, but tonight, he closed the laptop, tonight I think we need to do some research of our own. What the Neighborhood Watch Committee didn't know was that Marcus Williams wasn't just any corporate executive. Before his rise through the ranks at the shipping company, he had spent 7 years working in a very different field, one that would soon make Peterson and his associates deeply regret their surveillance campaign. The soft blue glow of the computer monitor illuminated Marcus's face as he typed rapidly, the clock on the wall showing 1 a.m. Tanya sat beside him at their kitchen island, both of them speaking in hushed tones to avoid waking the children. I still can't believe you never told me about this part of your life, Tanya whispered, watching as Marcus navigated through public records databases with practiced efficiency. It never seemed relevant, Marcus replied without looking away from the screen. 7 years in military intelligence isn't something that comes up in casual conversation. Besides, I signed non-disclosure agreements. What Marcus hadn't shared with the Neighborhood Watch Committee or anyone in Oakridge Heights was his background before corporate America. Before shipping logistics, Marcus had served as an intelligence analyst specializing in electronic surveillance and counterintelligence operations. Richard Peterson, Marcus muttered, pulling up a comprehensive background report. 53 years old, retired insurance adjuster, no military background, no criminal record. He scrolled further. Wait. Here's something interesting, 3 civil complaints filed against him in the last 5 years, all settled out of court. What kind of complaints? Tanya asked, leaning closer. Harassment, property disputes, and Marcus paused, his expression darkening. A discrimination suit filed by a Hispanic family who tried to move onto the street 2 years ago. Tanya's eyes widened. They moved out after just 3 months. The realtor mentioned it but said they had family issues. Family issues caused by Peterson more likely, Marcus said, continuing his research. Frank Henderson, 48, works in commercial real estate, member of exclusive clubs that have questionable histories regarding diversity. The third guy was Paul Whitman, former security consultant. Marcus opened another database and began cross-referencing information. Looks like these three have systematically pushed out at least 4 minority families from this neighborhood in the past decade. Always using the same playbook: surveillance, harassment, false reports to authorities. Can we go to the police? Tanya asked. Marcus shook his head. Not yet. Police Chief Thomas is a member of the same country club as Henderson. We need more evidence first. He opened a new window and pulled up the property plans for their house and the surrounding properties. The cameras are strategically placed to cover our entire property. This isn't amateur hour, they've done this before. Marcus reached into a drawer and pulled out a small device that resembled a TV remote. Signal detector, he explained, seeing Tanya's confused expression. I kept a few tools from my old job. You just happen to have surveillance detection equipment in our kitchen drawer. Tanya asked incredulously. Marcus gave a half-smile. Force of habit. Once you work in intelligence, you never really stop being cautious. The next morning, while Tanya took the kids to the community pool, Marcus methodically swept the house and yard. By noon, he had discovered 7 surveillance devices, 3 cameras, and 4 listening devices, all positioned to monitor the Williams family's activities. Rather than removing them, Marcus mapped their locations and signal patterns. By early afternoon, he had identified the receiving equipment in Peterson's garage and the secondary monitoring station in Henderson's home office. When Tanya returned with the children, Marcus pulled her aside while Jasmine and Tyler headed to the backyard. It's worse than we thought, he told her quietly. They're not just watching, they're listening. They've planted bugs in our patio furniture, the mailbox, even that decorative lantern the previous owners left. Tanya's face paled. Our private conversations have been monitored since we moved in, Marcus confirmed. But I have a plan. That evening, the Williams family hosted an impromptu dinner party. Marcus invited his former military colleague Samuel Washington and his wife Lisa, who had recently retired as a civil rights attorney. As they ate on the patio directly beneath one of the hidden microphones, their conversation seemed perfectly normal to anyone listening. How's the new position treating you, Marcus? Samuel asked between bites of grilled salmon. Couldn't be better, Marcus replied cheerfully. The company's expanding our operations next quarter. I'll be overseeing the new regional hub. The conversation continued naturally until the children went inside to watch a movie. Once alone, the 4 adults maintained their casual tone while passing a notepad between them, their true communication happening in written form. On the notepad, Marcus detailed the surveillance network and his plan. Samuel nodded as he read, occasionally adding notes of his own. Lisa's expression remained neutral as she wrote extensive legal strategies on the pad. What Peterson and his associates didn't realize as they monitored the seemingly innocent dinner conversation was that their surveillance operation had just triggered a sophisticated counter-operation led by a man whose specialized training made their amateur efforts look childish by comparison. As the evening concluded, Marcus walked his friends to their car, speaking loudly enough for the hidden microphones. Thanks for coming. We should do this again soon. Once inside the vehicle with the windows up, Samuel leaned out. Operation Reverse Surveillance begins tomorrow, he said quietly. Those bastards won't know what hit them. Marcus nodded once, his expression resolute. They picked the wrong family to harass. At precisely 6 a.m., Marcus activated the first phase of his counter-surveillance plan. Using equipment provided by Samuel, he deployed a series of signal jammers strategically positioned to create blind spots in the neighborhood watch's surveillance network without completely disabling it. A critical distinction that would prevent them from immediately realizing they were being countered. The jammers are online, Marcus confirmed to Tanya as they shared coffee in the kitchen, speaking normally despite knowing their conversation was being monitored. They'll create just enough interference to degrade video quality and cause audio dropouts, nothing that would seem intentional, Tanya nodded, maintaining their facade of normalcy. The kids have that field trip today, I'll drop them off at school. While Tanya handled the school run, Marcus called his office and requested a personal day, his first since joining the company 3 years ago. Once alone, he methodically executed the next phase of the operation. First, he activated a specialized application on his laptop that Samuel had provided, a signal interception program that would allow him to tap into the neighborhood watch's own surveillance feed. Within minutes, Marcus could see what they saw, grainy footage of his empty house and yard, with periodic static caused by his jammers. Amateur hour, Marcus muttered, typing commands that would trace the data packets back to their sources. The program quickly identified three primary monitoring stations: Peterson's home office, Henderson's basement, and a remote server accessing the feeds via encrypted connection. The third endpoint made Marcus pause. They're sending this to someone outside the neighborhood, he realized, initiating a deeper trace. The results confirmed his suspicion. A private security firm with troubling connections to local law enforcement was receiving copies of all surveillance data. By noon, Marcus had completed his reconnaissance. He sent a secure text to Samuel. Phase 1 complete, 3 nodes identified, external contractor involved. Proceeding to Phase 2. Phase 2 began when Marcus left his house carrying what appeared to be a simple toolbox. To any observer, he was just a homeowner doing routine maintenance. In reality, he was deploying a network of his own surveillance devices, micro-sized cameras and audio recorders that Samuel had sourced from his security company. Marcus worked methodically, placing devices with clear sightlines to Peterson's and Henderson's properties. He positioned several near their surveillance equipment, ensuring he would capture any attempts to adjust or service their cameras. "Just trimming the hedges," Marcus called out cheerfully when Mrs. Jenkins from across the street walked by with her dog. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Lovely," she replied hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with direct interaction. Marcus noted her quick glance toward Peterson's house after their brief exchange. By 3 p.m., Marcus had installed 16 counter-surveillance devices throughout the neighborhood, each transmitting encrypted data to a secure server Samuel had established. Now it was time for Phase 3 provocation. When Tanya returned with the children after school, Marcus greeted them in the driveway with unusual enthusiasm, speaking loudly enough for the hidden microphones. "Great news, everyone. I just got off the phone with the community center. They've approved our proposal to host the Cultural Diversity Festival right here in Oakridge Heights next month." This was completely fabricated, there was no festival planned, but Marcus knew it would trigger a reaction from Peterson and his associates. "That's wonderful," Tanya played along perfectly. "How many people did they say would attend?" "At least 300, Marcus replied, suppressing a smile as he imagined Peterson's reaction. "They're inviting community groups from all over the city." Inside their home, Marcus showed Tanya his laptop screen, which displayed multiple feeds from their counter-surveillance network. On one of the feeds, they could see Peterson pacing in his office, phone pressed to his ear, gesticulating angrily. "Hook, line, and sinker," Marcus whispered. By evening, the neighborhood watch committee had called an emergency meeting at Peterson's house. Thanks to Marcus's devices, he and Tanya watched the entire proceedings from their kitchen. "This is unacceptable," Peterson was saying to the gathered neighbors. "A festival, with hundreds of outsiders coming into our neighborhood, we have to stop this immediately." "The real estate values alone would take a hit," Henderson added, "not to mention security concerns." What followed was 45 minutes of increasingly explicit racist commentary as the group discussed how to handle the Williams problem. They outlined previous tactics they'd used against other minority families, confirming what Marcus had suspected about their pattern of harassment. Most importantly, they explicitly discussed their surveillance operation, with Peterson instructing 2 other neighbors on how to reposition cameras for better coverage of the Williams property. "Got them?" Marcus said quietly as he recorded everything. Every word, every admission, every conspiracy. That night, as Phase 4 of the operation commenced, Samuel's team began systematically documenting and cataloging all evidence. Lisa Washington began preparing legal briefs based on multiple violations of federal wiretapping laws, invasion of privacy statutes, and civil rights violations. What Peterson and his allies didn't realize was that their own surveillance network had become the perfect tool for documenting their crimes, crimes that would soon be exposed to authorities far beyond their sphere of influence. By 7 a.m. the following morning, Marcus's counter-surveillance operation had collected over 14 hours of incriminating evidence. His laptop displayed multiple data streams organized into neatly categorized folders: audio recordings, video footage, and network traffic logs, all meticulously time-stamped and encrypted. "The documentation is comprehensive," Marcus explained to Tanya as they reviewed the evidence. "We've captured explicit admissions of racial targeting, conspiracy to harass, illegal surveillance, and attempted property value manipulation." Tanya scrolled through the transcripts Marcus had generated overnight. "This is incredible. Peterson actually said they need to make an example of us to keep the neighborhood pure." "Verbatim," Marcus confirmed. "Timestamp 21/42/17, and Henderson discussed bribing a county inspector to find code violations on our property that don't exist." Their review was interrupted by the doorbell. Checking the security camera Marcus had installed the previous day, they saw Samuel Washington standing on their porch with a professional-looking woman they didn't recognize. Good morning, Marcus greeted them at the door. Please come in. Once seated in the living room, Samuel introduced his companion. This is Agent Diane Carter from the FBI's Civil Rights Division. After reviewing the preliminary evidence, she felt this warranted immediate attention. Agent Carter nodded professionally. Mr. Williams, based on what Samuel has shared, you've uncovered what appears to be a coordinated conspiracy to violate federal housing discrimination laws. I'd like to see the complete evidence you've gathered. For the next 2 hours, Marcus walked Agent Carter through the extensive documentation, explaining the technical aspects of how he'd intercepted and verified the surveillance network's authenticity. The most concerning element, Marcus explained, pointing to a network diagram on his laptop, is this connection to Shadow Guard security services. They're a private contractor with concerning connections to local law enforcement. Agent Carter's expression remained neutral, but her rapid note-taking indicated significant interest. We've encountered Shadow Guard in 3 similar investigations across the state, she confirmed. This could be part of a larger pattern. As they concluded their review, Agent Carter closed her notebook. Mr. Williams, this is exceptionally well documented. We'll need to move carefully, however. These connections to local authorities complicate matters. What's our next step? Tanya asked. We need to continue gathering evidence, Agent Carter replied. But we'll also need to prepare for potential escalation from Peterson's group. They're likely to intensify their harassment once they realize their intimidation tactics aren't working. As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed with an alert from his security system. The screen showed Peterson and Henderson approaching their front door, accompanied by a man in what appeared to be a county inspector's uniform. Right on schedule, Marcus said grimly. They're moving to the next phase of their playbook. Samuel quickly helped Agent Carter gather her materials and led her to the kitchen out of sight while Marcus and Tanya prepared to answer the door. Remember, Marcus instructed Tanya, everything they say is being recorded now. Let them talk. When Marcus opened the door, Peterson immediately launched into his rehearsed speech. Mr. Williams, this is Inspector Davis from the County Code Enforcement Office. We've received multiple reports of unauthorized modifications to your property that may violate local ordinances. The inspector stepped forward, flashing a badge too quickly to read properly. We'll need to conduct a full inspection of your property inside and out. Marcus maintained a calm expression. May I see your credentials again, please, and what specific violations are you investigating? The inspector hesitated, glancing at Peterson. Various potential structural and safety concerns. As neighborhood watch captain, Mr. Peterson has a duty to report such matters. I understand, Marcus replied evenly. However, I'll need to see a properly executed inspection warrant before allowing access to my property. Peterson's face reddened. That's not necessary for a routine inspection. Actually, it is, Marcus countered. County Code Section 47.3 specifically requires judicial authorization for non-emergency inspections without homeowner consent. I'm familiar with the regulations. The inspector shifted uncomfortably. I can come back with the proper documentation. Please do, Marcus replied pleasantly. And when you return, perhaps you can explain why your badge number doesn't appear in the county employee directory I checked this morning. The 3 men exchanged alarmed glances before Peterson stepped forward, his facade of civility crumbling. Listen, Williams, you people need to understand how things work here. This neighborhood has standards. You people, Marcus repeated, ensuring the hidden microphones captured every word. Could you clarify what you mean by that, Mr. Peterson? Henderson grabbed Peterson's arm, clearly trying to stop what was coming, but Peterson was too far gone. You know exactly what I mean. Your kind isn't welcome here. We've kept this neighborhood clean for 20 years and we're not about to let it change now. Marcus nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Peterson. Is there anything else you'd like to say for the record? The fake inspector backed away, suddenly aware that something wasn't right. I think we should continue this another time, he muttered. As they retreated down the walkway, Marcus closed the door and turned to find Agent Carter standing behind him, having heard everything. That, she said with professional satisfaction, was textbook intimidation with clear racial animus. Your counter-surveillance operation just paid off, Mr. Williams. Back in the living room, Samuel was already downloading the fresh evidence. We've got them, Marcus. Audio, video, and witnesses. They've handed us everything we need. Not quite everything, Marcus replied, his expression serious. We still need to identify who's pulling the strings at Shadow Guard and their connection to local authorities. This goes beyond Peterson and Henderson. What none of them realized was that the confrontation at the Williams doorstep had triggered a cascade of panicked communications throughout the neighborhood watch network. Communications that would soon reveal connections to individuals far more powerful than a retired insurance adjuster and a real estate agent. Marcus sat at his command center, What had once been their dining room table now transformed into an intelligence operation hub. Three monitors displayed different data streams: surveillance footage, intercepted communications, and a complex network diagram showing relationships between key players in the neighborhood harassment campaign. Shadowguard Security's CEO is Robert Winters, Marcus explained to Agent Carter, who had returned with two additional FBI agents. Former police captain, retired 15 years ago, but the interesting part isn't Winters, it's who funds Shadowguard. Marcus pulled up financial records his counter-surveillance operation had intercepted. Their primary investor is Oakridge Development Corporation, which owns 30% of the residential properties in this neighborhood. Agent Carter leaned forward. And who controls Oakridge Development? That's where it gets interesting, Marcus replied, clicking through to a complex ownership structure. It's a subsidiary of Clearwater Holdings, which is owned by, he paused dramatically, Mayor James Wilson and Police Chief Thomas. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. So the mayor and police chief have financial interests in maintaining property values through keeping neighborhoods segregated, Agent Carter summarized, her voice professionally neutral despite the gravity of what they'd uncovered. Samuel, who had been analyzing communication patterns between the neighborhood watch members, looked up from his laptop. It's even deeper than that. I've traced communications going back 3 years. They've systematically targeted minority families in 6 different neighborhoods, always using the same pattern: surveillance, harassment, escalation, and eventually forcing them to sell at below-market rates. Tanya, who had been reviewing legal documents with Lisa Washington, added, and guess who bought those properties after the families left? Subsidiaries of Oakridge Development every time. Agent Carter nodded grimly. This is a classic blockbusting scheme with a modern surveillance twist. They're manipulating property values through targeted racial harassment. Marcus pulled up another screen showing a timeline of events. The operation accelerated 18 months ago when the city announced plans for the new tech corridor. Properties in these targeted neighborhoods have increased in value by over 40% since then. As they consolidated their evidence, a ping from Marcus's security system alerted them to movement outside. The external cameras showed 3 police cruisers pulling up to the curb. Looks like Peterson called in his connections, Marcus observed calmly. Right on schedule. Agent Carter immediately pulled out her phone. I need to call this in. This situation could escalate quickly. While she stepped into the kitchen to make her call, Marcus turned to Tanya. Remember the contingency plan. If anything happens, Samuel has a secure backup of all evidence, and Lisa has already filed preliminary briefs with the Justice Department. Tanya nodded, fear and determination mingling in her expression. The kids are at my sister's, they're safe. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by heavy knocking. Police, open up. Marcus checked the camera feed. 4 officers stood at the door, led by a sergeant whose nameplate read Miller. Behind them, Peterson and Henderson watched from the sidewalk, poorly concealing their satisfaction. Marcus opened the door calmly. Good afternoon, officers. How can I help you? Sergeant Miller stepped forward. Sir, we've received reports of illegal surveillance equipment being operated from this residence. We have a warrant to search the premises. Marcus accepted the offered document, reviewing it carefully. This warrant appears to be in order. However, I should inform you that there are federal agents currently on the premises conducting their own investigation. The sergeant's confident expression faltered. Federal agents? As if on cue, Agent Carter appeared behind Marcus, displaying her credentials. Diane Carter, FBI Civil Rights Division. We're in the middle of collecting evidence in an ongoing federal investigation into housing discrimination and illegal surveillance activities in this neighborhood. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Perhaps we should discuss this situation, Sergeant, Agent Carter continued. Your department may not have been fully briefed on certain aspects of this case that involve members of your command structure. For the next 20 minutes, Agent Carter spoke privately with Sergeant Miller in the front yard, occasionally gesturing toward Peterson and Henderson, who had retreated to Peterson's property but remained watching. When they returned, Sergeant Miller's demeanor had changed dramatically. Mr. Williams will be postponing our search pending coordination with federal authorities. He turned to his officers. Let's go. Before leaving, Sergeant Miller paused. Sir, if you've been experiencing harassment, I encourage you to file a formal complaint with our department. Some of us take these matters seriously. As the police departed, Peterson stormed across the street, his face contorted with rage. This isn't over, Williams. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, Mr. Peterson, Marcus replied calmly, I know exactly who I'm dealing with, and so do the federal authorities now. Back inside, Agent Carter was already coordinating with her field office. We need to move quickly. Once word gets back to the mayor and police chief, they'll start destroying evidence. Samuel looked up from his computer. Too late for that, our network has already captured their emergency communications. They're in full panic mode and we've got it all documented. Marcus nodded with grim satisfaction. Phase 5 begins now, Operation Exposure. What Peterson and his co-conspirators never realized was that Marcus Williams hadn't just been collecting evidence of neighborhood harassment. He had painstakingly documented a years-long conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of local government. A conspiracy that was about to be exposed to the entire city. 72 hours after Operation Reverse Surveillance began, the Williams family sat in the conference room of the federal building downtown. The large monitor on the wall displayed a live news broadcast where the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District stood at a podium addressing a crowd of reporters. Today, we are announcing federal charges against 14 individuals in connection with an organized conspiracy to violate the Fair Housing Act and federal wiretapping statutes, the U.S. Attorney announced. This investigation has uncovered systematic discrimination, illegal surveillance, and corruption reaching into multiple levels of local government. Marcus watched with quiet satisfaction as the camera panned to show Peterson, Henderson, and the fake inspector being led into the courthouse in handcuffs. Behind them walked Mayor Wilson and Police Chief Thomas, their expressions a mixture of shock and defeat. The evidence in this case is extraordinary in both its breadth and detail, the U.S. Attorney continued. Thanks to the diligence and courage of one family who refused to be intimidated, we have documented a years-long pattern of discrimination that has affected dozens of families across multiple neighborhoods. Tanya squeezed Marcus's hand as they watched the press conference. They actually did it. They're really bringing charges. Agent Carter, seated across from them, nodded. The U.S. Attorney's Office rarely sees cases with evidence this comprehensive. Your counter-surveillance operation documented not just individual acts of discrimination, but the entire conspiracy from street level to City Hall. Samuel, who had been coordinating with federal technical experts to preserve the evidence, closed his laptop. The network analysis confirmed financial kickbacks to 7 members of the city council. This goes beyond housing discrimination, it's systematic corruption. Lisa Washington entered the conference room with a thick folder of documents. The civil suit is ready to file. We've identified 23 families who were previously driven out of these neighborhoods. Many have already agreed to join as plaintiffs once they learned about the evidence. Marcus looked at the files spread across the table, hundreds of pages of transcripts, financial records, and surveillance logs. What had begun as a family barbecue had uncovered a conspiracy that had been operating unchecked for over a decade. "What happens to our home?" Jasmine asked, speaking up for the first time. The teenagers had been brought to the federal building that morning after the arrests began. "That's your home," Agent Carter assured her. "No one is going to force you to leave. In fact, the preliminary injunction already in place prohibits any harassment or interference with your family." Tyler, who had been unusually quiet throughout the ordeal, looked at his father. "Did you always know about your skills from your old job, I mean? Did you know they would help us like this?" Marcus smiled at his son. "I never imagined I'd need to use those skills again, especially not to protect my own family, but I'm grateful I could." As the press conference concluded, Agent Carter's phone buzzed with a message. The initial hearing just concluded. The judge denied bail for Peterson and 4 others due to witness tampering concerns. They'll remain in custody pending trial. Outside the conference room windows, they could see reporters gathering in the lobby below. Word had spread about the family whose counter-surveillance operation had exposed the conspiracy. "You'll be asked to speak," Agent Carter warned. "The media is already calling this the reverse surveillance case. Your family's story is compelling." Marcus exchanged glances with Tanya, who nodded her agreement. "We'll speak, but on our terms. This isn't just about our family. It's about every family who was forced out before us and every family who deserves the right to live where they choose without harassment or discrimination." As they prepared to face the media, Marcus's phone lit up with a message. It was from Sergeant Miller, the officer who had come to their house with the search warrant. "Internal Affairs is cleaning house. 6 officers suspended so far. Thank you for what you've done. Some of us have been trying to expose this for years." 3 weeks later, the Williams family hosted another barbecue in their backyard. This time, the guests included several neighbors who had reached out after the arrests, apologizing for not standing against Peterson sooner. Also present were 2 families who had previously been driven from the neighborhood and were now considering moving back. As Marcus stood at the grill, he watched Jasmine and Tyler playing volleyball with their new neighborhood friends. Tanya was showing Mrs. Jenkins from across the street her garden plans for the spring. Samuel approached, handing Marcus a cold drink. "How does it feel?" Being the family that broke the case that's now being taught at the FBI Academy as a textbook example of citizen countersurveillance, Marcus smiled, looking around at the diverse group of people enjoying his backyard. It feels like justice, not just for us, but for everyone who came before us and everyone who will come after. In the distance, moving vans could be seen at two houses down the street. The properties previously controlled by Oakridge Development Corporation had been sold as part of the asset forfeiture proceedings. The new owners, a Vietnamese-American doctor and an African-American professor, would be moving in by the end of the week. The neighborhood is changing, Tanya observed, joining them. It's not changing, Marcus corrected gently. It's becoming what it always should have been, a community where families are judged by their character, not their color. As the sun began to set over Oakridge Heights, the surveillance cameras that had once monitored the Williams family were gone, replaced by security systems the residents controlled themselves. The neighborhood watch signs had been taken down, soon to be replaced with new ones reading simply, "Inclusive community, all welcome here." What had begun as a targeted campaign of harassment had instead transformed not just a neighborhood, but an entire community's understanding of justice, vigilance, and the power of one family's refusal to be intimidated. Marcus Williams, the former intelligence officer who had simply wanted to grill burgers for his children, had instead dismantled a conspiracy and changed a city, all because someone had made the mistake of installing cameras to spy on the wrong family's backyard barbecue.